Thank you very much, Lauren. I hope all of you had a good lunch. We have a difficult task, which is keeping you awake. So, nothing more interesting than a financial discussion towards that goal. But we promise to keep you entertained and a fruitful discussion. I am accompanied here by my dear friend David Wilson, clerk of the Parliament of New Zealand, Elaine Cameron, uh, the head of infrastructure and operations at the Houses of the Oireachtas, um, Rocca, the Director General at the Cámara de Representantes of Uruguay, and Luís Machado, the Executive Director of the Legislative Knowledge Institute, and also representing RGB and EGCP here from Brazil. I will grant each one of you 5 minutes for your opening presentations, and I kindly ask you to be strict to that time, given our time constraints. And for us to start our discussion, I'd like to give an opening provocation here for our thought, which is how is your parliament structuring your long-term planning for technological modernization, and in the sense that how are you able to maintain this administration infrastructure and long-term planning despite the constant and sometimes radical changes in leadership? So I will handle the floor to you, David, to you to start with your opening presentation, and feel free to use the floor.
Thanks very much, Luís, and look, it's lovely to be here. Nice to see you all, and thanks to the House of Oireachtas and Bússola Tech for inviting me and hosting us. So this is a really topical thing for me to talk about from New Zealand, because we've had some significant changes in how we structure parliamentary finance. So just for a quick introduction, New Zealand Parliament's derived from the Westminster Parliament. It's been unicameral since 1950. We changed our electoral system to mixed member proportional, so a proportional representation system, instead of first past the post in 1996. And so our parliament is a mixture of Westminster traditions, I guess merged with some European parliaments that use proportional representation. So it has its own unique features. New Zealand has no codified constitution either. It's one of the few countries in the world that doesn't, and that plays an important part in this. I guess the result of all of those things is that in Westminster-style parliaments, the executive is part of the legislature, but it's the dominant part. And that's been a significant problem for funding of the parliament. The funding has been controlled by the government until recently. Cabinet, we've made submissions to Cabinet when more budget's been required. Generally, they've been rejected. Not really because the amounts of money were relatively small. Treasury didn't think it was very important. And for the government, nothing that Parliament does helps it deliver on its election promises. Often Parliament criticises and scrutinises ministers in ways they don't really enjoy. And so the result of that has been a long time where it hasn't been well funded. The presentation I'm going to do later this afternoon goes into detail about what those changes were, but I think what you need to know is that a parliamentary committee now considers those budget submissions, not Cabinet, and it makes a recommendation to the House, not the government, and the House as a whole decides now on what Parliament's budget will be. Of course, that still involves members of the governing parties, but they take part in that decision as members of Parliament, not as members of the executive. And that's been an important change that's resulted in a significant uplift in funding just in the last month. That's going to ensure, I think, a great deal more stability and gives members a bigger stake in the services that are provided to them and how those things are funded. It removes absolute government control, but as I said, they still play a part as members of Parliament. And it gives a more stable environment to plan and gives some certainty, although the budget's an annual one, of course, it's always open to change. I think one of the things that we've done in terms of structuring finances is really trying to unite our proceduralists, our finance people, and ICT people in planning. So that we need to agree about what Parliament needs, which is something that we as clerks have some strong ideas about, what it can afford, which our finance people can help with, and how long things will actually take and whether they're technically possible. So I guess that goes back to that sort of iron triangle of quality and cost and time. We're in catch-up mode in New Zealand. I think, as I said, there was a long period of neglect and underfunding. So there are a number of legacy systems, just going back to the last panel we had, that need updating. But that does create some opportunities for us to replace or update these things, but also to stop and think about how and why we do things certain ways. One future challenge for me is how to better engage with elected members on future needs of the institution. It's probably fair to say New Zealand elected members are not generally that interested in that question. They're reasonably happy with the services they get, but when they don't like something, they do become very interested and all then have opinions. And I'll just give you a quick example. I decide, actually I won't, just looking at the time, we'll save that for later. For now they agree with the need to upgrade. I guess the question for us is what's next. I see great utility for AI in helping us manage the hundreds of thousands of public submissions we're now getting every year, maybe to assist with first drafts of interpretation. We're a bilingual parliament. English and New Zealand Māori are the two languages we work in. Possibly checking amendments to flag them up to a human decision maker, potentially doing some drafting. At the moment we use AI to produce our Hansard. We separately caption Parliament TV so that people who can't hear can follow proceedings. I'd like to unite those things so that we only write down what was said once and it flows through into all the places it's needed. So I really think there are lots of good opportunities for us. We really need to just get, I think, be a bit better about thinking about what opportunities we have to perhaps change things we've always done a certain way. One big change was Hansard, which used to take about a week to produce, so the transcript of proceedings. We talked with members and said, if we spend a bit less time on quality and going back and forth with you about exactly what you said, would you prefer it to be faster? They said yes, they'd much prefer it to be faster. So whereas it took a week, it now takes 2 hours to produce, and that's something that AI has helped us with. They can still correct it if they think something's wrong, but they're comfortable with that. So I'll stop there. I guess the key thing is dialogue is really our future challenge.
Thank you very much, David, for your opening presentation and for your comment and for being on time as well. I'd like to recognize now Rocca. I think he's back. So I'd like to recognize now Carlos Rocca from the Chamber of Deputies of Uruguay for his opening remarks as well. Carlos.
Muchas gracias, Luis, nuevamente. Ahora sí. Muchas gracias, Luis, nuevamente, y bueno, al Parlamento de Irlanda por su cálida recepción. ¿Qué tema me toca? Si bien no soy un experto financiero, tenemos que intentar llevar adelante la gestión de la Cámara de Representantes. Antes que nada, lo que quiero es agradecerles a todos ustedes el sentimiento de pertenencia con cada uno de sus parlamentos, porque la verdad que han hecho sus presentaciones, nos llenan de orgullo respecto a que todos estamos involucrados en mejorar la gestión de todos los parlamentos. Y hablando de parlamentos, ayer intentaba yo explicar en la reunión de la mesa del Parlamento de la realidad uruguaya. Uruguay tiene una realidad un poco particular. Está muy desarrollado digitalmente, encabeza las listas de incidencia de lo digital en América Latina, está 25 en el mundo a nivel de desarrollo digital. ¿Y dónde está el Parlamento? El tema está que el Parlamento también tiene su independencia, su libertad, y tiene su presupuesto. La Cámara de Representantes puede votar por sí su presupuesto, que es incluido automáticamente en el presupuesto nacional, no tiene que pasar por una revisión por ningún lado, pero siempre ha estado de la mano de un trabajo en conjunto político desde la recuperación de la democracia en el año 1985. En ese sentido, a partir de esos primeros gobiernos y de esos primeros parlamentos, se ha mantenido una coherencia institucional respecto a la aplicación de la tecnología y a llevar adelante el cambio digital. Cuando recién en el 85 nos incorporamos, era todo todavía mecánico y pudimos ver en todo este transcurrir el proceso de digitalización, con distintas realidades, con distintos desafíos, una cuestión híbrida que tenemos. No voy a profundizar mucho, pero la Cámara de Representantes tiene su división computación y sus sistemas de gestión propios. También tenemos un sistema de gestión informático legislativo en conjunto con la Cámara de Senadores. Distintos avatares que hemos tenido en el tiempo nos han permitido avanzar en tener una idea común. Hoy día la interoperabilidad es uno de nuestros desafíos y los estamos logrando, pero a su vez lo más importante de todo es buscar el entendimiento de las autoridades, la comprensión de que es necesario invertir en tecnología. ¿Por qué? Porque es en beneficio de ellos mismos. Este año, el presidente de la Cámara acaba de presentar su presupuesto. El 90% del presupuesto que presenta tiene una incidencia estrictamente digital. Apunta a atender temas como ciberseguridad, manejo de datos, aplicación de tecnología específica en la interna de nuestra división de tecnología. Por lo tanto, la apuesta está sobre la mesa. Pero no lo podemos hacer solos. Entonces acá viene lo otro interesante, que de todo eso que yo explicaba respecto a la ubicación de Uruguay en esos índices internacionales digitales, es que tenemos una agencia de gobierno que ha podido nuclear el esfuerzo de todo el Estado para poder llevar adelante las políticas y llevar adelante las soluciones digitales que puedan ser usadas por los distintos organismos. En ese sentido, la incorporación de la inteligencia artificial está de la mano de ellos, pero está de la mano de una cantidad de regulaciones que se están estableciendo. Hay una política de incorporación de la inteligencia artificial al Estado. Si bien todavía no es una ley, se dieron los primeros pasos para no de golpe sacar una ley sin llegar a haberla estudiado por todas las entidades que pertenecen a nuestro Estado. En ese sentido, muchas veces generamos estos mismos ámbitos internos dentro del Estado uruguayo para que participen tanto el Poder Ejecutivo, el Poder Legislativo y el Poder Judicial para tener una política común estatal respecto a la tecnología. Bien, esos índices y esas políticas se han gestionado a través, sí, de leyes específicas de acceso a la información pública, de protección de datos personales, y a su vez acabamos de firmar un convenio con el Consejo de Europa sobre inteligencia artificial para que pueda también venir de la mano de las soluciones que vamos a llevar adelante. Hay que tener cuidado. A veces algunas personas, autoridades, en virtud del conocimiento que tienen de que en algún lugar o en algún otro lugar han desarrollado soluciones, quieren que en poco tiempo tengamos soluciones similares, parecidas, pero nosotros estamos afianzándonos en nuestra particularidad digital, nuestros cuidados de datos, para recién después ver si la inteligencia artificial puede ser aplicada en los procesos. Hoy hay un estudio interno en la Cámara de Representantes respecto a qué áreas serían las mejores para incorporar la inteligencia artificial, cómo ayudarían a nuestros sistemas a poder funcionar mejor, cómo ayudaría a que los funcionarios puedan, los funcionarios técnicos, desarrollar a través de la inteligencia artificial ayuda para programar, para que nuestros sistemas puedan estar más desarrollados. porque aparte les quiero explicar, que explicaba un poquito ayer, que la mayoría de nuestros sistemas son propios. La mayoría de los sistemas de gestión, de expediente electrónico, de gestión de datos, son todos propios. Y eso también es un insumo importante económico a la hora de tener en cuenta, para tomar en cuenta, porque ahí atrás de estas cosas hay mucho esfuerzo personal y hay un desafío permanente de rebeldía respecto a no quedarnos respecto a la tecnología. Así que bueno, este es un poco el panorama respecto a nuestros apoyos económicos.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Thank you very much for your opening presentation. I'd like to recognize now Elaine Cameron from the Houses of the Oireachtas for her opening presentation in 5 minutes. Elaine, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon. It was supposed to be good morning. I just thought I'd open just by saying it was an interesting conversation, the previous panel, around governance and data and getting foundations right before you move forward. Because I think all of those topics that you mentioned under the heading of legacy applications is very informative and needs to be, and seeps into that kind of funding discussion and those funding decisions, because a lot of those elements that were discussed are not front facing, are not bright and shiny, but they're the foundations, and those foundations still need to be funded. So I might just start by saying that the House of the Oireachtas, the approach to, I think, long-term planning hasn't come from a single strategy document. It has been an approach probably shaped more by the experience over the last decade. So we've been doing a digital transformation journey for about 10 years now, and in that period we've made huge strides and we've delivered many systems which Kimaid has driven, and you know, that has involved us upgrading and in many cases, you know, replacing legacy systems, improving how we manage data, and gradually moving towards more interoperable platforms and systems. But I think what the journey has really shown us is that, you know, modernisation is not something that you complete. We're still looking forward to, you know, potentially the next decade, if we're lucky to be still here. And it's not something that you complete, it's something that you build over time. And I think each step has to connect to the next step, and each investment has to contribute to the broader institutional architecture of any organisation. So I think when we think about long-term planning, we're very focused on the idea of building something coherent. We don't approach modernisation as an isolated set of projects. Instead, I think we consider each initiative and how that initiative strengthens the overall ecosystem or enables maybe future capability. Thank you. So that probably naturally brings us to the question around priorities. And then for us, that has been consistently, you know, that has meant focusing on the foundations, particularly at the beginning. And things like data governance, which were mentioned earlier, interoperability, and addressing those legacy systems, they were all, you know, foundational conversations that we had. And, you know, they're not always visible investments, and they're not always the easiest to prioritise, especially when there's competing demands. But they are what makes everything else possible. You know, the analogy that we tend to come back to is building a house. You know, the foundations take time, they cost money, and once the house is built, you don't get to see any of it, but they're absolutely critical. So if you don't get those things right, everything else is compromised. And our modernisation approach has been very much about investing that time up front. So I think another key piece for us is continuity. This kind of transformation doesn't fit neatly into short-term cycles. You know, it requires a sustained direction, multi-year planning, and a consistent investment over time. So we've worked quite deliberately to ensure that each phase builds on the next and trying to avoid fragmentation or rework. So I think equally important is the organisational dimension. Technology alone doesn't deliver transformation. It requires aligned processes, engaged people, and embedded ways of working. And over time, we have actually placed an increased emphasis on this, you know, and integrated this element into all our planning. I think as we look ahead, particularly in the context of artificial intelligence, I think our approach probably remains consistent. There's obviously a lot of focus now on emerging technologies, particularly AI, and rightly so. But for us, those developments don't change our direction. They probably actually reinforce it. It underlines the importance of strong digital foundations and long-term planning. So how parliaments plan, fund and sustain their digital and technology modernisation over time so that it doesn't stop, stall or lose direction. I think if I had to summarise our approach, it comes down to probably a couple of simple things. It's taking a long-term view, it's investing in strong, sustainable foundations, and it's making sure that each investment will contribute to the next.
Thank you very much, Elaine, for your opening considerations. I'd like to recognize now Luís Machado. Luís, would you like to share your opening thoughts? Luís will speak in Portuguese, so I advise you to put the headsets.
Muito obrigado, Luís Kimaid. E é um prazer, uma honra participar deste distinto grupo que aqui se encontra e justamente para até mesmo tentar representar o ministro Augusto Nardes no Tribunal de Contas da União, que não se faz presente nesse plenário em vista do estado de saúde. Dizer sobre a governança é algo que também fascina bastante. E daí trazendo até mesmo uma afinidade, né, com o Dr. Daniel Schumann, né, do Instituto Americano de Governança no Brasil. O ministro fundou a Rede Governança Brasil, que destaca com mais de 35 comitês de diversas áreas, no sentido de trazer desde a regulamentação daquilo que se pode ter de uma lei nacional sobre governança pública que está em tramitação no Senado Federal, já foi aprovada na Câmara dos Deputados, no sistema do Brasil é bicameral. E com isso tem sido bem equacionado, principalmente junto aos órgãos de controle que tem no Brasil, principalmente na Associação dos Tribunais de Contas, que adotou o Programa Nacional de Transparência Pública, e desse enlace é que verteu também o Programa Nacional de Governança, que está dentro da própria Rede de Governança Brasil, destacando-se principalmente na preparação dos agentes políticos. Quando nós falamos agentes políticos no Brasil, são aqueles que lideram tanto os executivos, como os prefeitos, governadores e presidentes, bem como aqueles que são eleitos representantes do povo nas câmaras municipais, que são 5.568 no Brasil, são os vereadores, né? Obviamente, quando nós falamos, né, do planejamento financeiro, adotamos dentro da própria Rede de Governança Brasil um programa de mentoria. Esse programa de mentoria consiste em levar até aqueles gestores e também titulares dos órgãos das câmaras municipais, das assembleias legislativas, temas de suma importância, como o planejamento estratégico institucional, vertendo daí o controle interno e mais a comunicação, o setor de orçamento, o setor de pagamento, bem como de recursos humanos, que vem trazer toda uma estrutura de organização para que venha facilitar até mesmo a gestão pública. Diante disso, nós temos que entender que os órgãos públicos dependem de dar satisfação à população, daqueles que pagam os seus impostos, a produção legislativa, principalmente. Quando se fala, né, principalmente da tecnologia que é implantada em cada casa, hoje já temos muitas dessas câmaras sem papel. o que até mesmo o Marcos, né, então, no paper, tem essa pegada, né, então, essa função, né, de fazer com que não tramite, né, o processo legislativo com papel, nem mesmo o processo administrativo, que é uma área bem sensível, visto que a exigência dos órgãos de controle é que aquele gestor da mesa diretora seja responsável para que executou um pagamento hoje, uma despesa hoje, amanhã já deve estar no próprio site, colocada toda a população com uma transparência. É justamente em cima disso, primeiro pilar que nós temos da governança, assim adotado pela Rede de Governança Brasil, é a transparência. E vejo que a inteligência artificial ela pode muito bem, né, trazer a transparência para que isso seja motivado e levado a toda a população. Um outro pilar é a equidade. A equidade justamente para mitigar as diferenças, principalmente sociais, e quando se trata de parlamento, é que não existe uma hierarquia entre aqueles que são os agentes políticos, trazendo lógico, né, o staff para aquele que é o presidente, para aquele que é o gestor, para aquele que está na mesa diretora, e é dentro desse princípio que a gente vai falar mais adiante, né, então, sobre os mandatos, né, então, das mesas diretoras que têm as suas limitações. O outro é a accountability. Tá? Então, com isso, todas as notas que, dali, no caso, são levadas em licitações, também em concorrência, para que, dali, a própria Câmara possa, vamos dizer assim, adquirir, né, então, os seus produtos e também os seus serviços. E, por fim, o compliance. Nada mais do que melhor ter uma casa de leis com compliance, seguindo as leis, com a conformidade legal, para que venha cobrir esse espaço dos 4 pilares da governança. E, com isso, nós temos cursos de pós-graduação, justamente pelo Instituto de Governança Latino-Americano de Governança e Compliance Público, que é também, né, liderado pelo Tribunal de Contas da União, né, dentro dessa estrutura que a gente procura promover, né, de capacitação legislativa, da educação legislativa, nesse sentido de buscar, né, então, qualidade de serviços públicos para a população. Muito obrigado.
Muito obrigado. Thank you, Luís, for your opening presentations, for being on time. I have prepared a few questions to all of you so we can have a short discussion on this topic. And David, I'd like to start with you, if you'd let me. And if you allow me, I also like to mention to colleagues that you were the biggest advocate for this discussion for many years. I think we only started to bring the financial long-term planning after a recommendation from David many years ago. So as a very important topic, and since then we have developed this as one of the lines of research at Bússola. So, David, and you recently led very important efforts in the New Zealand Parliament, specifically with the Parliament Bill, and trying to strengthen the institutional and financial foundations necessary to ensure your long-term planning and continuity of parliamentary operations. In your view, what are the essential elements that parliaments should consider when designing their long-term financial planning for technological modernizations, particularly when considering balancing investments in digital infrastructure, the institutional capabilities with your staff, the legislative services and innovation, but also ensuring the continuity beyond the political cycles, beyond the changes in leadership that we most common have in our parliaments?
Well, thanks, Luís. I think, the key one, I think, around ensuring those foundations is that you've got a funding stream that works. Of course, we'd all like more money for the various projects. We'd like unlimited time and resources to do them. But as I've identified, I think we had a real obstacle to modernising our Parliament, which is it just wasn't a priority for the government. It wouldn't be a priority for any government. So for me, I think ensuring that funding foundation was right was important. Taking a long-term view is an important thing, and I think that's likely to come from staff of the legislature because we tend to be there for a long time. We're not elected. We have quite a high turnover in the New Zealand Parliament. 30 to 40% of MPs come and go at each election, and we have a short electoral cycle. It's 3 years. And so we're there long term. We tend to have the institutional memory. Part of my role is to advocate for Parliament as well. We're also the ones who have to execute these projects, deliver on them, and then answer for their performance. So it makes sense that a lot of that driving force lies with the staff. As I've said, we need to improve our dialogue with members once we get past the stage of catching up on our sort of technological deficit, I suppose. But then it's going to be really important about connecting those experts with the providers, primarily IT, with users, which are members and staff and the public, and then I guess recipients as separate from users, people who receive information or services, public and MPs. I've talked about that connection. I think super important between the people who understand the technology, people who understand the procedure, and those who can help us plan for what we can afford. And I think it's really important that these things are not expected to be IT-led. They're a really important expert component of the work, but it's not reasonable for them to be expected to do that. Equally, it can't be left to the clerks because most of us don't have a really strong grasp of technology. It needs to be a partnership, and I think that's something we've done some really good work towards in New Zealand. New applications and technology are also a really good chance to test procedures and see if they're still fit for purpose. One example in New Zealand was that between various stages of builds, there had to be a stand-down period. That stand-down period had been based on the fact that legislation was printed on paper. That took some time and it was available to MPs in hard copy. One MP made the very good point that although that still happens, it's all available online. They can get bills much more quickly, and that stand-down period could be shortened. And all of them unanimously agreed that would be all right. In another case, when we started allowing electronic petitions, we did change our standing orders, our rules of procedure to provide for those. One thing I hadn't thought about is the number of people who would collect signatures for a petition with no intention of actually presenting it to Parliament. They were happy for it to be online, for people to get the message and all sign for it, and they didn't want to do anything else. So are we going to host those petitions on the Parliament website forever? Well, we decided we're not going to. They've got a time frame. So you need to circle back and think, well, there's some great advantages of the technology. People can reach everyone in the country. They can get signatures easily on these, or names on them anyway. They can follow the petition's rules, but you just need to tweak these things so that they work in an electronic environment. And some of these things, is a matter of trying them and seeing how they go and then making adjustments. I guess one other key principle for me is that this work is never finished. You can get to the end of a project and be really happy with it, but you know that you're going to have to go back and do it all again one day. Technology moves on, things wear out. You just have to accept that. I think it's really important to depreciate your capital assets properly. I know that sounds a bit boring, but you don't want to have to rush to replace things having not saved for them, and when systems are out of support or obsolete. So that sort of planning is incredibly important. I think for us, modernisation, in terms of modernisation, AI is going to be really important for the future. Our workload is growing massively. As I was saying to one of our colleagues here, we've been really good in New Zealand at engaging the public with Parliament. We're now being overwhelmed with public submissions. I think there is a role for AI in helping us process those so that a human decision maker can look at those that really need attention. We need to keep reconsidering our rules of procedure, as I said, and we're quite well placed to do that because we do a 3-yearly review before each election and tweak the rules. That's going on at the moment. I think, you talked also, Luís, about balancing, competing investments in digital institutional capability, legislative services and innovation. I don't think those things are in competition with each other. I think digital is the contribution to institutional capability and innovation and continuity. We can't do everything at once, but I think all of these things work together really, really well. Yeah, I'll stop there. I see we're up to 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, David, for your comments on this question. Carlos, my question is to you now. You want to go? So, under the current presidency of Congressman Rodrigo Goñi, whose leadership has consistently demonstrated a strong commitment to parliamentary modernization, the Chamber of Representatives of Uruguay has advanced important discussions on innovation. So, from your perspective, how is this political support ultimately translated into concrete financial decisions within the parliament, whether through the procurement of specialized services, the hiring and training of technical personnel, investments in technological infrastructure, the promotion of the international cooperation or institutional initiatives that sustain these long-term modernization efforts? You were there in the parliament for 40 years. You met many speakers of parliament. So, what is your recommendation on that topic?
Bueno, todas las que dijo Luis y más. El desafío es permanente. El presidente actual de la Cámara, Rodrigo Goñi, es un ferviente defensor y promotor del desarrollo de la tecnología aplicada bien, pero el otro día estábamos reunidos nosotros en la Cámara de Diputados tenemos un programa de transparencia que particularmente yo coordino junto con otros integrantes, directores de los distintos servicios. Y bueno, ante una cantidad de dudas sobre cómo llevar adelante la incorporación de algunas soluciones tecnológicas, se generan las dudas a largo plazo de cuál va a ser la realidad. Hoy por hoy, a nivel global, hay 2 o 3 empresas que son las que regulan el futuro, las que tienen asegurado el funcionamiento de la inteligencia artificial. Y por ahora no sabemos a nivel de costos si esto se va a disparar o no se va a disparar, si se va a mantener la posibilidad de acceder a esas plataformas de la forma que se accede hoy, o si por distintas causas del mercado va a cambiar. Por lo tanto, lo nuestro es paso a paso, la incorporación paulatina de la tecnología a las distintas gestiones que venimos realizando con responsabilidad. A nivel de cómo se puede trasladar esto a largo plazo a nivel financiero, nosotros abrimos el espectro, como explicaba hace un rato, a un trabajo conjunto dentro del Estado. Nosotros nos valemos del asesoramiento de la Agencia de Gobierno Electrónico, también nos valemos de la academia, ya que es convocada muchas veces a través de convenios para el desarrollo, no solamente la academia estatal, sino también la academia privada. Se hacen convenios con distintas instituciones específicas para llevar adelante muchos de los proyectos que en una de esas no tenemos el personal idóneo total para poder razonar la incorporación de la tecnología. Y ahí vamos avanzando. La idea de la parte económica, de cómo vamos resolviendo lo económico, se basa en eso, en que muchas veces la agencia de gobierno electrónico estatal va procurando soluciones que pueden ser incorporadas por los distintos organismos en conjunto, lo que favorece obviamente la tarea y el aporte que la Cámara de Representantes tiene que hacer. Por lo tanto, lo que estamos haciendo es intentar abrir la cabeza, hacer convenios, a su vez para obtener mano de obra especializada a través de convenios con la Facultad de Ingeniería de la República para poder tener estudiantes que comiencen a ayudarnos en la parte básica del apoyo digital, para así poder, de esa manera, nuestros recursos dedicarlos exclusivamente al desarrollo programático. O sea, la idea es seguir continuamente informados para poder tomar las mejores decisiones.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Thank you for your comments on this. Elaine, allow me to bring my next question to you. The Oireachtas has developed a particularly interesting approach to its modernization, particularly in recognizing that the effective use of AI relies on a digital infrastructure that moves way beyond the specific models, but rather on your digital capabilities as a whole, and having your systems for a digital legislative process integrated, your data structured, and so on. So my question to you is, in a moment when different parliaments feel the pressure to deploy as many different AI systems as is possible, could you kindly share your reflection on the challenges of sustaining this more structured long-term approach, one that prioritizes the building blocks that are necessary for the technological foundations before scaling the use of AI across different departments and operations in the Oireachtas?
I think probably a starting point for us is that artificial intelligence has undoubtedly accelerated expectation, whether that's from the citizen or the members or our own staff. There's a lot of energy around it, and there's a lot of expectation, and there's a sense that organisations need to move quickly, and that can create a real tension against the kind of structured long-term approach required for that sustainable transformation that we've kind of experienced in the past. I think the challenge is that, as I said earlier, that work that matters, doesn't always look like progress from the outside, and the value of AI is fundamentally dependent on what it sits beneath the data quality and governance and interoperability. And these are not immediately visible. They require funding, but they're not immediately visible, and they're not always, they won't create quick wins for us. So, but yet we know without them we can't sustain the transition, and potentially can't sustain investment. I think AI tools can produce very quick wins and very visible results, and there's a natural pull in the direction towards pilots and proof of concepts. As an organisation, we've responded to that in a very balanced approach, I think. We've developed targeted pilots, but we've done so in a very structured way. We still have the governance and we still have the oversight in place that monitors and manages the decisions we're making and why we're making them. And I think it's been a really useful approach, because it's kind of given us the ability to learn as we go along, and it's helped us build an understanding, but in a very controlled controlled environment. I think the key step for us is ensuring that we don't skip the steps that actually make those tools work at scale. So those foundations, without those foundations, you can end up with solutions that sit in isolation. Without integration, there's a risk of fragmentation and duplication, and that leads ultimately to higher costs. There's probably other challenges as well. I think alignment across the organisation is one. AI can't be just adopted in pockets. It needs to work across processes and systems, which means that it needs us to take a coordinated approach to the delivery of it. And I think capability is another, in that AI introduces new considerations around our data, around governance and oversight. And we need to be building those skills continuously within the organisation. And I suppose continuity as well in that long-term approach. That requires us to stay on course. Even when there's pressure to move a bit faster, that's not always easy, but I think it's essential if we want to get real value from the investments that we're making now in the long term. I think probably the most difficult aspect is maintaining that long-term perspective when the external environment is sometimes moving more quickly, and that would be probably a criticism leveraged at the public sector quite a lot, that we're too slow to move, and maybe in some regards that's true. But I think our own experience over the last 10 years, around modernisation, tells us that it can cost you to move too quickly. Without any of those good foundations in place, and we can lose out over time. So I think while AI undoubtedly, will accelerate the pace of conversation, I think it shouldn't underlyingly change the approach that we're taking. We see it as another tool. It's an important tool, and it probably will be an even more important tool as we go into the future. But it does depend on us having, to retain control and having good structures in place and good foundations. I think that's really where the challenge lies. Like, it's not about us resisting innovation, it's about maintaining the discipline to continue investing in the groundwork, particularly when that work is less visible, and when there is pressure to move quickly, as I said. At the same time, it's about ensuring that when we do scale, that we actually scale in a way that's properly integrated in our systems, that's aligned with our processes, and is supported by the right governance and capability. So I think ultimately, when I was thinking about this over the week, I think it's about coherence. It's ensuring that AI is not introduced in isolation, but as part of a broader structure, and and a more structured approach to modernisation. And I think if we do that, it'll be one that's sustainable over time and can deliver real value, practical value, in a parliamentary environment.
Thank you very much, Elaine, for your comments. Luís, I'd like to bring my last question to you. As we've been discussing here through the last hour, modernization requires projects that often... Parliamentary modernization requires projects that often extend beyond individual leadership cycles and require long-term institutional continuity to generate meaningful results. From the perspective of institutional oversight and public accountability, how, in your view, could robust long-term planning frameworks help parliaments preserve the strategic modernization initiatives across changes in political leadership, avoiding the discontinuity of projects, the loss of public resources, and the weakening of the institution itself?
Ok, Kimaid, permita falar em português, então. Nós temos aí uma jornada, né, ao longo de 10 anos, né, então, que, junto com a Bússola Tech, que a gente vem falando sobre essas questões mandatárias pelo Brasil afora, principalmente quando o Kimaid falava assim, olha, mas quantas câmaras municipais têm site? Então, muitas tinham só Face, e algumas nem isso, só transmitiam as sessões pelo YouTube, e era o que bastava. Mas, fazendo parte do programa Interleg do Senado Federal, durante 15 anos, a gente conseguiu levar para os mais rincões do país a modernização. Mas, com isso, também a gente tem aquele outro entrave. Já ouviram falar assim de vamos dizer, deserto de gestão? Um deserto. Forma um deserto a cada mandato, a cada legislatura. Porque saem aqueles atores, entram novos atores, e a continuidade, então, da gestão. E é justamente em cima disso, do accountability, né? Então, que a gente procura identificar essa lacuna, esse gap. Ou seja, o que a gente mais percebe é que muitas casas legislativas, e o Kimaid sabe bem disso, tem 9 vereadores, 1.600 habitantes, tem 2 servidores, 3, quer dizer, então pouco se dá atenção para aquela estrutura. Obviamente que há câmaras que compõem mais de 17, 20, ao total de 55 vereadores, isso falando de casas subnacionais, né? Então, em municípios brasileiros, que tem uma estrutura mais arrojada, mais forte para isto. Mas eu penso que seria fazer uma transição da gestão. Então, consistindo colocar naquelas casas a rede de interlocutores, né, com os próprios servidores que são ali efetivos, são titulares e que conhecem bem a estrutura, né, para poder repassar aquelas contas, então, para os próximos gestores. Porque nós temos ali o monitoramento, que é feito pela fiscalização contábil, orçamentária, financeira, patrimonial, e todo esse contexto deve ser levado aos órgãos de controle, evidente. Mas para isso se pode construir, e a gente tem essa ideia de colocar uma sala de inteligência, ou sala de monitoramento, ou sala de governança, em que os dados daquela Câmara Municipal, tanto do RH, sabendo qual foi o gasto daquele mês, sabendo qual em diárias ou então em salários, sabendo qual o orçamento que chega até aquela Casa Legislativa, que no Brasil nós chamamos de duodécimos, dependendo dos valores que aquele município possa arrecadar. Então, 6%, 7% da receita corrente líquida chega para cada Câmara Municipal. E daí tem que se gerir daqueles valores e não pode passar de 70% daquilo que recebe com o pessoal, senão já incorre em crime de responsabilidade do gestor. E muitas vezes aquele gestor vai acomodar pessoas de seu apoio lá no seu final de mandato, quer dizer, então deixando para o próximo presidente, para a próxima mesa, uma despesa que talvez não possa suportar. Então, quando nós falamos da reunião desses dados, que pode a inteligência artificial fazer esta varredura com todos esses elementos, e que, nesse caso, quando se coloca num dashboard, numa sala de inteligência, uma sala de governança, então já se sabe ali o quanto que se pode usar daqueles valores, não deixando para os gestores futuros algo que, dali, no caso, vai ser difícil, né, então, de administrar, difícil de gerir. Então, basicamente, por isso nós falamos do deserto de gestão, né, então, trazido aí por essa descontinuidade, né, por falta de prestação de contas. Obrigado.
Muito obrigado. Thank you, Luís Fernando, for your remarks. We are reaching the end of our panel, but before we go, I'd like to yield the floor back to each one of you for 1 or 2 sentences to close today's discussion. Very briefly, please. I'll do this alphabetically, if you allow me. Carlos, would you like to, very briefly, 1 or 2 sentences to conclude today's discussion?
Bueno, conceptos, frases, muy simple. Hoy Luis me mencionaba el tema de algunas incidencias que el presidente de la Cámara en este momento está llevando adelante. Y quería mencionar algo que me resulta interesante, que está sucediendo en el Uruguay, que es el concepto de gobernanza anticipatoria. Es una perspectiva estratégica en las políticas públicas buscando que el Estado no reaccione improvisadamente, sino que modele los futuros deseables y prevenga riesgos en la sociedad. Eso es parte del deseo de llevar adelante una mejor gestión. Esta iniciativa fue presentada hace pocos días en la Unión Interparlamentaria, que también se hizo eco del tema y va a crear una comisión especializada en lo que también en el Uruguay se llama la Comisión de Futuros, o sea, que es un concepto entre todos a llevar adelante. Bueno, por acá termino.
Muchas gracias, Carlos. Thank you very much. David, would you like to share any final thoughts?
Well, thanks, Luís. And what I take away from the 3 days we've had is, AI is a series of tools. It's the latest tool that can help us work better. It's clearly not a replacement for people, and the presentations that I've heard over the last few days, it's not designed that way, and it can't perform that way. So while it can't replace people, it can free them up from work that is either repetitive or boring or takes a long time. It can do some of those tasks really quickly, so long as it's well instructed. Given that, we're likely to need more resources to be able to explore those things and to put them in place. There might be future savings, but for now, I think it's a good time to look at that question of funding, the quantum, and also the methods of funding. Are they fit for purpose? That's a question you can only answer for yourselves. Certainly in our case, they were not. And it's a good time to address that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I need to learn how to say thank you in New Zealand, but Maori. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Elaine, would you like to say your final thoughts too?
Yeah, I think just in relation to funding, I think what I would say is, to set it aside, that regardless of whether your funding is yearly or longer than that, if you're looking for long-term sustainable investment, I think you need to build a picture. You need to tell a story, have a narrative around it. That if you're on an annual budget and you're going in with no sense of where that's going, the objective, that's a building block for the next piece and the next piece. So I think if you're going in to look for funding for any of this, there is capability and resource requirements. It's not just money. You'll need new people, different people. But I think unless the powers that be that hold the purse strings understand the direction you're going in and what you're trying to achieve, that would be a hard road to travel. So I would say start with that, start with the big picture, the long-term view, and then you might get the long-term investment.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Apparently it's Mile Biukus in Irish, so thank you very much. I'd like to invite Luís Fernando for his final thoughts in today's panel.
Ok. O que a gente percebe da fala dos colegas é essa universalidade, né, que tem, parece-me que em todos os parlamentos, como a descontinuidade, a burocracia e até mesmo aquela falta de transparência que a gente percebe existir. Mas aqui eu sugiro, né, então, até mesmo uma provocação, a proposta de cooperação, né, que dessa plenária possa até mesmo surtir efeito um grupo de trabalho para a modernização de IA nos parlamentos. Né? Então, essa ideia, né, que surge e que, quem sabe, seja acatado. Muito obrigado pela audiência.
Muito obrigado. Thank you very much, Luís Fernando. And I yield the floor back to Lauren for our remaining activities. Thank you very much.